Hey everyone, today we're going to go through question number 82 on the DeepML site, Grayscale Image Contrast Calculator, where our goal is to create a function that computes the contrast between pixels on an image. But before we go through and program this, we're going to actually learn the concept so we truly understand what's going on. Let's first start with the definition. Image contrast is the difference in brightness or color between different parts of an image. The best way to understand what that actually means besides reading the words, and it's sort of hard to actually internalize that, is an example. So let's say I made this text 0 as in opacity, it's completely white. What would the contrast be, at least within this box? The contrast would be 0 because there's no difference in color or brightness. If I make this 100, then you can say, oh, there's high contrast because now there's a big difference in between the background and the actual letters. If I made it 50 or 40, it's somewhere in the middle. So the contrast would be, 50% of, or, we'll come up with terms and mathematical expressions to actually quantify this. But just for an understanding, you could say like, oh, this has less contrast than this. An interesting question is, let's say, I make image, just one word in there, a little lighter. What happens to contrast? How will we, what's the contrast now? You can't say it's 30, this whole box, because only image is 30 and everything else is higher than that. So let's look at an example now. So we're going to take an example from the MNIST dataset. The MNIST dataset is a collection of hand-drawn numbers from 0 to 9. So basically every single number gets hand-drawn. Every single value in the MNIST dataset, every single pixel, is either 0 or any value from 0 to 255. So let's look at an actual number. So this is, number 0, and you can see basically every single dot here is a single pixel. And every pixel has value from 0 to 255, as I mentioned before. So for instance, if we look at the first pixel right here, you can see that's completely white, and that would have a value of 0. This gray pixel right here would probably have a value around 127. And the darkest of them would have a value of 255. So that's basically how we construct images with numbers. Now the question is, okay, what's the contrast? So if we just think about this, by ourselves without any equations or anything else, we'd say, the best way to do this would be, we take the highest value subtracted by the lowest value, and that's, will give you some sense of contrast in the image. So that's exactly what we do. So basic contrast calculation is we take the maximum value in an image and we take the minimum value and we just subtract them and get the difference. So let's look at a smaller example because this has a lot of pixels. Let's look at an image with 4 pixels only. So in this image we have, a pixel with 0, as in completely white, 127, 100, and 255, and we have 4 pixels right here. So if we take the max, it's obviously 255. If we take the minimum, it's 0, and the contrast is 255. So with this knowledge, you could actually go back to the DeepML site and actually solve the problem. But I want to, I guess, give you a few issues with this approach and show you another approach that's not, you won't be tested on, but will help you in the future. So let's look at another example. Image number 2. Image number 2 is constructed with a 0, 255, 255, and 255. And if we do the same calculation, we actually get the contrast is exactly the same. It's 255 here, it's 255 here. And that's an issue because, you would assume that this image should have a higher contrast because, it's changing a lot. There's a lot of change within here. Versus here, there's one pixel that's different and everything else is the same. So to deal with this issue, we basically have a different equation which basically takes the standard deviation of all the image and divides it by the mean, or normalizes it. As you can see, let's go through the same exact example, but this time we'll use this equation and we'll see what the results are like. Here we have an image with the same 4 exact same pixels, and we take the standard deviation is about 91. Then we get the mean, it's about 120. We divide those values, get 0.75. We do the same thing for the second image, we get 0.58. So the difference here is that we could actually say like, oh, image 1 has higher contrast, and this equation captures that it has a higher contrast because every pixel is different. Here, 3 pixels are the exact same, one is different. We understand, image contrast, and we understand the ideas behind it. We could go back to the DeepML site, try and solve this question now that we understand the key concepts. It's relatively simple to solve this. It's basically return np.max, and we take in the image, minus np.min, and we take in the image again. We run this code, and we'll eventually, it's testing it through a few different test cases. The DeepML site has a lot of questions, a lot of them harder than this, but this is a good foundation one. So we have, foundational questions, just learning the basics of machine learning and data science, all the way up to like really hard questions. But one thing is constant. We only currently we only allow NumPy because we want people to try and build things from the ground up. Looks like we got our solution. We got it all right. Looks like we got our solution, and seems like everything was good. Um, we could, if you didn't watch this video, you could also, all of our problems have learn sections. You could learn a lot more about them. But this is basically how you calculate the grayscale, the contrast of a grayscale image. Now that you watch me solve it, go to the site and try it out for yourself.